Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin. Andy McCloy, it has been a really long time since I've had you on the podcast, and you are, for everybody listening, the owner of BCI Performance and Fitness in Huntsville, Alabama. Everybody will hear the accent in a second. You train athletes that have gone on to play in, the big pro North American sport leagues. You're the co-founder of Built to Last, which is a business mentorship, gym owner mentorship with our friend Luca Hosevar. And you and I both spoke. So I met you in 2017 at the Vigor Summit, Luca's event. And then you and I both came back 7 years later to both present at that same event, which was deeply meaningful, I know, for both of us. So welcome back.
Very cool. Very cool. I think the last time you had me on, was Dean on a podcast with you? Like my brain just went there.
Dean Guido, yeah, my little
graphics. You like put my head over top like the Terminator or something. It was funny. I remember that now.
If anybody really wants to go into that old one, DM me, I'll dig it out for you. It's part of the old stream and stuff, but it's still back there. But yeah, different focus. So we're going to get serious here. I'll tee you up to tell some story here, but you're an interesting story from having some pretty dark, rough days, younger days, to, a very serious legacy of success within your business in Huntsville. And you're a good example of personal resilience. I really wanted to tap into that theme. So this requires your backstory. So I'll give you the floor to share a little bit.
Yeah. So my story is unique, I think, in the strength and conditioning and fitness world. There are plenty of misfits like me in our industry, but the people that I looked to when I first got into this world were all very polished, all had gone to college, had, significant degrees, and had very traditional path. Like even as a strength coach, maybe they graduated, they played college football, they became a GA, they then, worked for that strength coach and then kind of got across the country. My journey was very different. I do live in Alabama. But I'm not an OG Alabama guy. I was born right outside Washington, D.C., an area called Prince George's County, Maryland. I spent the first 22 years of my life, or 21, 22 years. You guys will have to forgive me on dates. I've also had a lot of head trauma. So, but somewhere around then, at that point in time, I decided to move to Alabama at that age. And that was not a decision that I took lightly.
This episode is brought to you by Macros First. I've always struggled with nutrition tracking apps, even the slightest hassle or friction, and it breaks my habit. That changed with Macros First. When I tried it, I told my friend, the founder, Jacob, quote, this is, let's just call it a certain other app on steroids. It's the easiest app to use, and it has a free barcode scanner, which if you use tracking apps, this is a really big deal. I recommend Macros First to all my clients and friends, and even had them sponsor my 2024 conference. Here's an example feature I love: auto-calculate food portions. Let's say you've got 30 grams of protein left for the day, and you're thinking, how much chicken breast do I need to hit that? In other apps, you're left guessing serving sizes, hoping you get close to your 30-gram goal. With Macros First, just tell it the target you want to hit, and it tells you exactly how much to eat. No more macro Tetris. Other apps ask, how much do you eat? Macros First also lets you ask, how much should I eat? Macros First is free on the Apple App Store or Google Play. And if you use the code Andrew, all caps, my first name, you'll get an extended free trial of Macros First Premium. That unlocks a bunch of features that make tracking way easier and faster.
My youth was tough. I grew up in an area where I always jokingly say it was like one of those like last neighborhoods where like kids fist fought on a regular basis. And my neighborhood was always beefing with other neighborhoods. And that required us to compete. And we competed in everything against those other neighborhoods, from fighting to sports and other illegal activities. Yeah, those were things that I got introduced to at a very, very young age. My father caught me selling crack at the age of 14 years old. And I had been doing that for quite some time. And I got involved in a lot of things that are a little uncomfortable for me to talk about publicly, but my youth was, I I was involved in a lot of things. And at 16 years old, to complicate that even more, I ended up having my first child. So here I am, 16 years old. I got a kid on the way. And shortly thereafter, my family, my dad got a job in Alabama. And he came to me and he said, hey, look, I think this is a good opportunity for you. You need to get out of this area. And to me, the only thing I knew about Alabama, to me, I looked at it the way a lot of people listening probably do, is I thought it was dirt roads, cotton fields, and racism. And where I grew up, that didn't fly. Like if you had any racist bones in you, that was going to be significantly to your disadvantage where I grew up. And you could have got hurt really bad. So I had no interest in moving to the South. But, here I am with this kid. I've knocked a girl up, about 4 years older than me. We're living in the projects down in Indian Head, Maryland at this time. And my life is rough, and I'm not really seeing a way out. And in fact, a lot of my desire to lift weights, I was very much into powerlifting at this young age, was centered around like preparing for the reality that I'm going to prison. I just don't know kind of when. Like it's just everybody I know goes to prison. So at some point in time, that's what's going to happen. And I'm living down in the projects, and I'm working out at this Gold's Gym. And I walk into this Gold's Gym one day, and there's a former Redskin wide receiver, NFL football player named Alvin Harper. And he's walking around with this other guy, kind of short, stocky guy. But I could tell this guy was important. And I'm watching him walk around the gym, and I'm watching him. And they go out in the parking lot, and I walk out, and I immediately see that, like, this guy's walking to a Range Rover. And I'm like, he's definitely significant. He's got a Range Rover. So I was like, hey, man, my name's Andy. Who are you? And I don't even remember how I broke the ice, but it was pretty I just blurted it out. And he was like, oh, well, my name's Eric. I own a company called HBI Fitness, Health, Body, and Image. I own the exclusivity contracts at all the Gold's Gyms and the basically Northern Virginia area, DC, and Maryland. And I was like, oh, wow, that's awesome. He's like, we're coming here to set up a gig. And I just said to him, like, man, I've always wanted to be a personal trainer. That was a complete lie. I don't even know where it came from. Call it God, call it my gut. I don't know, right? But I just said, and he was like, really? And I just said, yeah, man, but I don't have a degree. Like, I've got a kid. I just started like giving him this story. And he was like, why don't you come meet me tomorrow? And he gave me the address of the gym. I drove up there, and there was some other significant things. Like he took me to his condo, and he's then started telling me his story. And he had been in trouble like I had. He had gone through some things that I had. And he was like, man, I see potential in you, and I want to help you. So he got me my first personal training certification. He gave me a job working for him. And very shortly, within months, he came to me and was like, look, I need somebody that can go to all my locations, check in with the nutrition techs that are running this software called Apex, make sure they know what they're doing. Like, I want to give you the opportunity. I was like, okay, let's do it. So all of a sudden, I got this Director of Nutritional Services title, which basically meant I drove to gyms and just made sure people knew how to use this computer program. That experience was really valuable for me because I'm learning to connect with people in areas like Van Ness and Capitol Hill. And so for a kid like me coming from where I come from, like, I didn't have a very good handle on the English language. I talked with a lot of slang, and I wasn't professional, but I got put into this environment where I was kind of forced to act that way. And it was really, really valuable for me. And things were going good. I could see like, man, I could do this. But then there was a couple significant events that happened. I had a friend of mine killed. A couple of friends of mine went to prison. A lot of friends of mine went to prison. And there was a story that I've told publicly before that was a real big wake-up call. And it was, long story short, we had been beefing with these guys in Oxon Hill, which is another area in PG County. And long story short, it got back to me that these guys were going to shoot up my house. And that night, with my daughter's mother, who I do not like, I just knocked the girl up, and I was in this space where, like, now I'm in this house with this person I don't like. I have this child I love. I got to protect them. And basically we broke down my daughter's crib, moved it into the hallway, put mattresses up against the windows. And as I'm setting this up, there's this like voice in my head, like, what are you doing? Like you're having to set this up to protect your child because of the things you're involved in. And I just knew that the longer I stayed in Maryland, there was no way running from that. I'm kind of too involved in things to just be like, I'm out. And so I told Lacey, who was my daughter's mother at that time, I said, I think we need to move to Alabama where my parents are. And to her credit, she was like, it's a better environment for Cassidy. I'm cool with it. So overnight, my dad had sent me a long time ago. He sent me like one of these apartment books. And I started flipping through it because I never really paid attention to it. I'm like, yo, I can get an apartment in Alabama for $700 a month and there's a pool in the neighborhood. I was like, oh, I'm out. I'm out. So I started building this idea up in my head. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to Alabama and I'm going to start a business just like Eric did. That's what I'm going to do. So I get to Alabama. I came down here with a good bit of money in my pocket and just kind of chickened out. And I sat on it for a while. Like just not working, but I paid my rent up for a year and, you know, we were figuring it out for lack of better words. I meet some guys at a gym and start hanging out with them. But eventually the rubber met the road and I'm like, look, I'm going to blow through all my money or I got to do something. And I was too scared to like jump into starting a business. So I ended up taking a third shift job. And about 2-3 months into that third shift job, I was so miserable. I was like, I got to take a shot at this. And in between that time, I had decided that my daughter's mother was not healthy for me. And long story short, moved her across town. Well, at that point, she decided to take my child back to Maryland. And this led to a custody battle that I started to fight at that time. But it also led me to start dating this other girl. This other girl was a chief financial officer for a big government contracting company. And she started saying, hey, Andy, like you need to do the training thing. Like you talk about it, but like you should do it. And I was like, I don't know how to do it. I was like, I know how to train. I know how to do that, but I don't know how to run the business. And she was like, look, I'll help you. Like the books, like whatever you need, I'll do it. So long story short, I ended up very shortly, and there's a longer story attached to this, so I don't want to go too deep into that, but it's, I ended up, this client of mine who's a big time lawyer, basically helped me get a connection with the owner of the gym and put me in front of him. And what started out as my very first PowerPoint presentation that I did on napkins sitting at a bar, eventually he ended up putting it into a slide deck for me. And I made a presentation on how if that owner just gave me exclusivity over the gym, I would help him make a lot more money than what he's currently getting because he was just charging trainers for rent. I said, give me exclusivity. I'll give you a rev share. It went really good. And it blew up so well that another gym owner who owned 2 gyms approached me and I did an exclusivity deal with them too. And this was about 2000 to 2005. And I'm doing pretty good. Like I said, I wish I had a hard Scrabble story where like, oh my God, I couldn't pay my bills. But like, I've always been pretty good at making money for one reason or another. But it was not fulfilling. It was not good for my soul, kind of the way I was still living. And I was training athletes at that time. And I decided, you know what, I want to pivot all the way into athletes. I'd been studying it for a long time. And working with adults and kind of running this business out of gyms was becoming less fulfilling to me. I wanted a garage gym. Like that's what I wanted. So I went out and I started running camps and clinics and I set up school contracts. And again, everything kind of just fell in place. So eventually I landed at a high school where they allowed me to run a business overhead free out of their gym. I attracted kids from all over, helped that school become one of the perennial and most successful schools around when it comes to sports. And then I guess going on 15 years ago, pivoted into opening the location that we have now. And from that point on, we have taken off. I started doing all the work, every bit of all of it. But where we left off before with my daughter moving back to Maryland, she was about 3. Fast forward 10 years later, at 13 years old, I go back into another custody battle. After a divorce, I ended up winning full custody of her and getting full custody of my daughter. I've got my gym. I've got custody of my kid. I've got a really good name and reputation in my community. I'm doing all the things that I had set out to do, combine training programs, training NFL, NBA athletes. Like I'm doing it all, but I'm miserable because all I do is work. And now I'm faced with the reality that I don't really own a business. I own my job. meaning if I don't go to work, I don't get paid. And I didn't have the choice of sleeping in. I had to go to work. It means my child was being left at home while I worked till I came home till 7. Then I took her to school. Then I went back to work. Then I picked her up from school and I went back to work. And I worked till 8, 9 o'clock at night, rinse, wash, repeat, over and over. And it was heart-wrenching for me, man. It was like I got custody of this kid and I can't really spend any time with her. So I set forth at that moment. It's like, no, I'm going to learn how to build a business. I love being a strength coach. I love coaching people, but my life is not congruent with the strength coach's life anymore. And I need to learn how to build a business. So I started hiring coaches. I started hiring mentors. I'd already been reading books. I had already done the E-Myth Mastery program. I'd already done a lot of stuff, but was not really putting it into action. But this was like the leverage point. It was like, no, I have to create change. And, 15 years later, I own a successful gym. We're 7-figure gym. We're really profitable. I've got a staff of 8, and I'm pretty much operationally irrelevant now, where I don't work inside the day-to-day aspects of the business. I just lead the vision of the company. I manage the people, the culture, and the money, essentially. And I have a very fulfilling life. I get to take my daughter to school and pick her up now, but I also get to take off any day I want. I don't have to do the work anymore. And there was a lot of suffering to get to this point. And kind of the tattoo on my chest is Plena par sapientia. And it's a Latin saying that means pain equals wisdom. And all the struggles that I've gone through in life informed me of what was required next. And I've always just learned to lean into that and not expect things to be easy, not expect things to be smooth. So, 25 years later, I feel like I'm successful, maybe for the first time in my life, because I've created something that is in alignment with who I am and what I believe in. And I really think that should be the mission for most people. It's not money, it's not followers. It's like, can you create something that you're aligned with and that you believe in and provides the quality of life that you deserve? Because we all deserve that, but very few people create that. They get lost in kind of the vanity metrics of money and popularity, which I fully agree are very important. Attention is today's currency. But there's different ways to get attention. And if you run a brick and mortar gym like I do, the people, within a 5-mile radius of your gym are a lot more important than people in Taiwan. So I just kind of focused on my local community. I talk about becoming a local legend. And I'd like to think in some way I've checked that box, because we've got kids that grew up in my program at 11, 12 years old that are now 32 years old, and they train at my gym as an adult. Every week I'm having a lunch with a kid that came through my program who's now out in the world trying to become a business owner. And it's pretty incredible how things have come full circle. And like I said, I also have a 10-year-old daughter now, and I'm married, and I've been able to create a lifestyle for them that I'm really proud of. So that's the 10,000-foot view of it all.
There's a theme there. You've got a post. A post is obviously in the context of gym ownership, but I think we could extrapolate this to the way that you've thought about your decisions. No plan B. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, one of my sayings that I've been quoted a lot is like, for me, plan B was to make plan A work. And I don't know why the clarity came to me at such a young age of what I wanted. But I just knew, like at first, I knew that I could do this. I don't know why, but there's a deep belief matched up also with like an incredible insecurity. So I had this deep belief in myself, like I can do this, like I can. But I had this insecurity, like I don't have a degree. I've never had an internship. So that belief matched up with that insecurity kind of created this compulsion in me to study and learn. So I would read everything that you can find. I would study everything that you could find. I would call Elite FTS and ask Jim Windler questions. I would send emails to Joe Ken and Mike Boyle and, just really trying to get some traction. And the more I educated myself, I started to figure out who the players are in the game. Then I started to go visit them. And a lot of these guys that looking at them through the lens of the internet, when I got next to them, I'm like, oh, he's a man, I'm a man. He bleeds red, I bleed red. He's a sharp guy, but I don't think I'm stupid. I think I can do this. and it just started to solidify it. Then I started going to all these continuing education events all around the country, and I would meet people who I had shared values with. It might have been just like, we got kids, we got family, right? So I started to see other men and other people that have lives like mine. And I was like, oh, wow, like these are my people. I had this story in my mind that the way I grew up, like these aren't my people. It's a world of academics and athletes. And while there's some truth to that, like I said, there's plenty of misfits in our industry too, who are good people. And I use that term with love and a little humor. So
you can highlight, Luca. Luca's one of your best friends in the world, your business partner. And, anybody who knows Luca, he's a great friend to me. He's been a great supporter. And I certainly go out of my way to try to create opportunities for Luca. But in a way, dude's a misfit, right? He's very open about his story as being a total knucklehead back in his days growing up in Slovenia. But, he's also one of the big success stories of our industry. And it makes sense that you guys are, kindred spirits in.
So that's a good point. And I apologize for interrupting, but that's a really good point. It's that me and Luca had two things in common. One, a compulsion for learning and studying. I picked that up with him very early on. I'm like, oh, okay, he's like me. Like he's in the weeds with all this stuff. And I had heard he ran a good adult fitness program. And at that point, I was just training athletes. I had pivoted all into athletes, sold my contracts off to the gym owners. And I was really just working with athletes. So when I started, I was like, okay, I want to do an adult program who's good. When I found out he had played basketball and I found out he had a similar but different story, the misfit story, I was like, all right, that's my type of guy. I'm going to go visit him. So I flew out to visit him, and yeah, it's a 15-year friendship now, that he might be my best friend, and it has a lot to do with our shared values, some of the stories that we both have in common, and just a compulsion to make an impact in this industry, and to really help the gym owner and the trainer, very similar to him and I, who want to create something special.
And I'll give an example. So, and I'm going to give shout out my friend Ann Chisholm. She'll be listening. She loves what you do. And I met Ann at an event about a year ago. And, she's kind of a quiet, bright-eyed sort of person. And she's seeing all these other coaches in there. And she doesn't have the context to realize that she's so far ahead of almost everybody else in the room, but she thinks she's a very small fish. And so we get to know each other a bit. And I'm like learning about her multiple businesses. And it's like, no, she's really, really successful and doing really well. And so one of the things, again, she lives in Victoria, so that's not super far from Seattle where Luca's having his bigger summit. So I'm like, hey, I need you to come down to this, right? Because she had met Luca at the event that I met her at. But I'm like, hey, you need to come down to this because you'll get a lot out of this. And sure enough, your presentation was something that really resonated with her. So, and as you remember, she made a lot of effort. I introduced you guys talked a lot, and she jumped into your guys' mentorship, and she has been absolutely thriving in there. And we were just, again, with Luca at the Real Coaches Summit in Vegas, and I could see her grab onto other gym owners. She's talking about you guys' mentorship, and I could see a completely different understanding of, how she's doing. So it kind of, I want to go back into the comment about, being insecure. And there's something about an insecure overachiever that almost underpins a lot of really successful people. Do you want to explain, because for anybody especially who feels insecure about their place and everything, but the same people who find that they hustle and when they apply that they've been successful, what's going on there with that insecurity that drives success?
Well, I don't even know if I knew it was insecurity until I was probably 40 years old. I think I thought it was ambition. And I think sometimes ambition and insecurity look the same. Because there's a lot of people that if you want to put yourself out there and do more and be more, that comes with judgment, that comes with comparison, and that will trigger a lot of your insecurities. But that pursuit of a thing, ambition, if you will, I think those uncomfortable moments are required. Like you just have to submit to that. So the more I would submit to this stuff I wanted to do, it would bring up these feelings of like, am I good enough? Have I done enough? Do I belong here? And what I've always talked about is like, if you want to overcome self-doubt, you need to have some evidence to do that. And luckily, by the time I got to this point, I could objectively pull myself out of my emotions and say, no, I've done some things. Like I've done a lot. I've trained hundreds of elite college athletes. There's 15 kids that grew up in my gym, like from 8 to 10 years old, that are in the NFL. We got 2 more that are going to get drafted on Thursday to start with us at 9 years old. So when I started looking at the evidence in my business compared to some of the people that I respected, I was like, man, I'm doing similar things, and dare I say, better things in some ways. So that started to me overcome some of that insecurity by being able to logic my way out of that.
Do you think you naturally default towards action? You have a bias towards action?
I don't know, man. I have a bias towards survival, I think. And it's like, I don't want to lose. I can't ever be in a place where I can't feed my kid. I can't ever be in a place where the outcomes that I create don't benefit my family. So I think that has been survival is I've probably been thriving for about 4 years, 21 years of survival driving me, I think, is what really helped.
There's something else. I have a theory, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sort of was woven in there, is I think you can easily connect the dots looking back at a successful life, a successful career. But I think there's a naivety. The person, the Andy you described, the young Andy, was probably very naive in the things you let forward into. And I bet you any money, if you'd actually had a grasp on just what was involved, the work, the complexity, it would have intimidated you out of the action in the first place. So I believe that it's wise to bias towards action, not overthink. I think planning is very wise. And I'm not talking about blind faith. It's thoughtful action. But I think at a certain point, you have to bias towards action, because if you spend too much time ruminating over the amount of work, that will paralyze most people. And I bet you look back and go, because I do this with my own career, I'm like, how the hell did I get here? And it's a long climb. Now, again, a lot of just consistent action over time. And yes, this episode is definitely felt like it's a bit more business career stuff like the old episodes, but I still think this stuff applies to any career, any life, anybody's education, anything, any success in life.
100%. I mean, if we talk about this in the context of training, right? Ignorance is bliss, right? Same thing with a business. People don't understand how hard it is to actually develop muscle tissue. People don't understand how hard it is to actually move the needle on your conditioning, right? And if they knew how hard it was, they may not step into those challenges. And it's the same thing with business. People don't understand how hard this stuff is. And if they were aware, they probably would not take massive action. I just think I had this ability to filter out things and just put my head down and work. And that really, really worked for me, man. I jokingly say, first probably 5-6 years, I don't think I answered my phone for a business call ever. And my phone number was on all my cards. It was it was everywhere. I just didn't care. I was serving the people in front of me. I was connecting with my community. I was meeting coaches. There were a lot of things, I didn't care about nurture sequences on emails. I didn't even care about getting your email. I didn't care. I was just kind of doubling down on I'm going to do such a good job coaching these athletes that people in this state are going to know about it. And that's going to work in my favor. And, it's kind of what happened. It's I call it the cool kids lunch table, right? So when you're a coach in a community like this, if you can get the best athletes, man, they all know each other. They all hang with each other, and it kind of compounds. So my gym became this place where that's where the best athletes hang out. That's where the best athletes train. And that really, really worked for us.
Now, there's being a great and successful athlete making the pros, and then there is being a successful person, a good person. What are the qualities that you've seen in the most successful athletes? And maybe we can both go on the field, but I think in life. And is this stuff trainable?
I think there's two things. Your parents and your genetics are the two biggest thing, and they're both intertwined, right? So the quality of parenting that you receive matters for a kid. Now, I've seen kids with incredible home life go on to the NFL and play for years, and I've seen kids that grew up in really rough situations that played in the NFL for years. So I think it can go both ways, but your parents play a large role in this. The way you were raised, maybe some of the the missing stuff that you get from having a father in the home drives a desire to be a certain type of man. And some athletes anchor onto that. If you grow up with a mom and a dad in the home, and they kind of keep you on a straight path and avoid trouble, that can work for you too. But genetics are the biggest thing when it comes to, playing at the next level. Like, look, I know some overachievers for sure, but there's pretty much every kid that we've trained that's gone on to the NFL, I've called it when he was like 11. I'm like, that kid's going to the league. Like, you can just tell genetically some kids got it more than others. Talent can also be a curse for some kids. They don't take training as serious, and they can lose some opportunities because of that.
I know I've heard Ben Bruno, who's a pretty legendary, started out as a strength coach at Mike Boyle's and has, gone on to be more of, a general population, almost like he's more known for celebrity training, although that's not really, who he is. But in working with those pro athletes, he's often says they are freaks. And the key is to make sure you design good programs that don't break them, right? You allow them to be strong and thrive, but you just don't break it.
Yeah. Joe Ken, he's probably been my biggest mentor, told me, he said, Andy, you got one job when you're training athletes, and that's to get them to their strength coach healthy. That's it. And if you look at a way a lot of people train pro athletes now in the off season, and I blame this on this culture of content, I look at things people are doing with athletes at the time of the year, and I'm like, what are we doing? Why are we doing that? Like, he's got to go to camp in a week. Like, we should be throttling down now, not throttling up. So I think some of that comes into play as well.
Well, I guess I don't want to get too technical into the training side. Now, parents and genetics, those are things that the young person can't really control. What can they control in terms of attitude, behavior, especially because you've been a mentor figure in a lot of their lives?
Yeah. Attitude, effort, and social life, man. Like, you nailed the first two. It's like, do I have the right attitude? Do I think about things accurately? Do I show up and put in the right effort? Like, those are really, really big deals. Pro athletes have a lot of control over what they can do, but they also have a lot of influences that can work against them. One of the hardest things about training pro athletes is you get them in these usually very short windows. Those windows are also when they want to have a social life. So talking to these guys about the management of social life and the impact you can have on training outcomes is worthy. You should be doing that with those type of athletes. Like, you might have a guy who you train Monday, Wednesday, Friday. On Friday night, he flies to Miami. He parties Friday, Saturday, Sunday. He shows back up at a session on Monday. I don't care what you had planned for him that day. That probably should go out the window. And you should probably regroup and do some type of readiness assessment to see kind of the state of his nervous system right now and what he's ready for. That's why things like force plates, omega wave, like some of these things, they have real merit with all populations, but specifically with that population, because you can start to get an idea of like what their readiness level is and then guide your training strategies towards that.
HRV
as well. Yeah, HRV, VET.
I'm bringing Joel Jameson on soon. Now, I'm hoping to have a couple episodes with Joel, and one of the two, probably the second one I'll plan down the road, will get into more heart rate variability. So if anybody's interested in that, keep your eyes out. But again, just a really good way to see where someone is. You made me think of Dennis Rodman there for a second. And of course, Rodman is the anomaly, such a freak where it seemed like letting him go, run off to Vegas and let loose seemed to bring out his best. But I don't think that's the truth of the majority. And you also made me think, about the social influences. For anybody who knows basketball, Ja Morant, who I don't know everything, but let's just say that every time that he's on Instagram Live or someone is doing something live, he seems to want to pull a gun out, and that's gotten him into a lot of trouble. And my thoughts are that's probably the environment and the people he's surrounding himself with.
Well, I mean, look at Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan will go out and drink and play golf and then go drop 30 on you that night. Like, that Jordan didn't exactly live a real healthy lifestyle. And this is the greatest of the greatest, right? So you have a lot of young athletes that look to those examples and they think they can get away with that too. Like Lawrence Taylor was like doing lines of cocaine before, games, like his whole career. And he's very open about it. But the exception isn't the rule. And a lot of these guys don't really know how to take care of themselves. The guys that do will have incredible lives after the game. The guys that don't, like, there is no, free lunch. You're going to have to pay for that at some point in time.
What you just described is survivorship bias, right? We hear the stories. It's Steve Jobs being, one of the most brilliant creatives, marketers in Silicon Valley all time, the architect of Apple. And it's, leaves, comes back and basically saves a dying company. And the guy was a legendary asshole, the way that he interacted with his people. So what did we have? A generation of tech founders apparently behaving the same way, thinking that's the reason why their companies were successful. No, Apple was successful because of Jobs' creative vision and in spite of the way he treated people.
Now, I love that you brought up survivorship bias because I think that plays a large role in many people's doom. They look to some person that is successful and they are the exception. And then they try to model that way of doing things. But they don't see all the people that have suffered and failed trying to take that approach. And I know it's a very not cool thing to talk about these days, but this is something I talk about all the time, is that so many people are trying to win the game of business through content. And I fully accept that content is rocket fuel and it has incredible value. You must do it. But if you don't actually know how to run a business, eventually that will become the bottleneck, right? So I'm not in any way insinuating that you should not create tons and tons of content, because you should. But the skill set of learning how to run a business is going to be the thing that helps you navigate monetizing that following.
And this will be a little bit coach centric, but for the listener, this will also make a lot of sense. So I am someone who has had quite a bit of success building a social media following, for sure. Absolutely. But and I just spent a weekend in a room full of coaches, a lot of whom are very active on social media, a lot of whom are exclusively online, which is a tough place to be, by the way. You don't realize. But I had the good fortune of having been a busy full-time in-person trainer very quickly in my career. There's some survivorship bias there, timing and luck, but I have stayed busy. I'm recording this in between client sessions. I am just as busy right now as I was 12, 13, 14 years ago when I first started this stuff. Word of mouth has been incredible. My clients refer, they stay. And along the way, because of that, then a friend of mine, Dean Guido, as you mentioned, wanted to start this podcast. Cool. Awesome. We did that. We did it because I had the bandwidth as a playground, because I was all set and in a good position as a trainer. That took on a life of its own. It continues over 7 years later. Along the way, I got connected with one of the editors of T Nation. I've been reading T Nation for a long time. And I also just wanted to write for my website because I had the bandwidth and the security to do something that was creative and I enjoyed, because I had the main stuff on lockdown. That led to an invitation to write for T Nation. That blew the doors open on that. I study writing behind my shoulder. For anybody on video, there's my library of books on writing because I enjoy studying it. And I was able to, because again, the business side of stuff was on lockdown, I could then use it as a way to educate, to share ideas, just as a playground. I didn't anticipate the things that would happen and the other publications would lead to. Then I turned around and went, well, I've got all these other things. I might as well take this stuff and use social media as a way to, for creative expression. And again, I rode a wave. It was good timing. A lot of my friends in the industry that I've made in my travels, like a Dr. Mike Israel and others who share my stuff, helped build the initial wave of, driving people to see my social media. But it was always coming from a place of, I already had this foundation of strength, that I wasn't this new coach struggling to build an online business who's playing the content game to try to compete in a very noisy space, like Jonathan Goodman's book, The Obvious Choice. If you guys are really interested in this, that's a great book on this topic. And Andy, you have lived the philosophy that is in Jonathan's book about getting, 5 Mile famous and having this stuff on lockdown versus trying to compete and get attention on social media. Social media has been fulfilling and rewarding. It's led to public speaking stuff. I've always been able to do it as a place of fun and passion to connect with people, build relationships, support other people. And this has never been my career and livelihood have never been predicated on anything to do with social media. And if I never leaned into Instagram, I would still be busy full-time in person.
You absolutely would, because the market rewards expertise and you can be very successful whether you have a following or not. I am in a place right now where I do want to increase my following. And I do think that because I've built a business already, that will be a little bit easier for me. There's a lot of lessons that I've learned. I have a lot of social proof that shows I know what I'm doing. And now I'm starting to be more proactive in that area. I think it's a lot harder to do it the other way. I think it's a lot harder to do the content thing to build the business. Your situation is probably the most ideal way to do it. It's like become a well sought out, known coach and trainer locally, and then use content to expand the opportunities that you can create for yourself. But I think people are impatient. They don't want to create that social proof. They don't want to, do the hard work. And I just think that we're doing these young coaches a disservice if we just talk about content in social media. They need to understand there's other paths to success. And you may really enjoy it 25 years old, shooting all this content. At 45 years old with 2 kids and a wife, that amount of content can become competition with other things that are deeply important to you. So I think when you're young, if you develop the skill set of learning how to build a business, that will play well for the rest of your life. You can get better and better at that game when you learn how to run a business through people and systems. Okay, like that eventually becomes your job as like the visionary of a company. Like there's no expiration date on that. We have not seen the social media world play out yet. We don't know, like the 30-year-old influencer today, does he age out of his following? At 60, do the same people care? Or does he have to recapture a new following? We're in uncharted territory. We don't know what that's going to look like in the next 20 years. They're already putting out AI pages now that are incredibly well done, that look like real people with brand messages that are really powerful. Nothing for nothing. I don't want to compete in that space. My local community can make me the money I want, can create the life that I want. So I'll double down on that first, right? And then focus on these other things. And where I'm at right now in my life, I have zero desire to put up 5 social media posts a week unless I can pay somebody else to go do that for me, which, to be fully upfront, is probably what I'm going to do. Is I have a ton of podcasts I've been on. I've had a lot of speaking engagements. And I'm just going to pay somebody to chop all that up. I'll create the messages and let them run the channel for me. That way I can dip into social media when I want and be productive and communicate with people that value the message I'm sharing. And then I can dip on out and pay attention to the things that are more important to me, which are my family and my brick and mortar business.
There's a lot of good stuff here. And I hope everybody listening, takes this to heart. And again, I know this episode definitely goes a little bit heavier on the career side of stuff, but I still believe there are lessons in here for everybody. So everybody can find you at Andy McCloy. It's MCCLOY _BCI. That's your Instagram account. What other resources do you want to direct people to?
Well, Luca and I have a company called Built to Last Gym, where we teach gym owners how to build a profitable gym through operational excellence and what we call a coaching first approach. So we like to work with people that really are good coaches and want to make a big impact in their community and build a gym to do that. You can get information there at builttolastgym.com. You can also find Luca online as well. He can always connect people with me if it's easier to find him. Instagram is about the only place that I hang out these days. I just play around every now and then on Facebook, but if you want to talk and get some insight into how I think, you can definitely find me on Instagram at the handle that you dropped.
And people can message me as well, and I will direct them right to you. And Luke is another good example of something similar to what I did. I mean, he's got the physical gym, whereas I've always operated as a personal trainer. But again, he's had great success with the social media. Now, he's been very savvy about it, but it's all built from the foundation of the success in the gym first and his relationships across the industry.
And coaching.
And he is the prototype. He is the poster child for coaching, right? And so he's done lots of presentations on this stuff. And, again, anybody who's part of my ecosystem should be following Luca because he's been on guest on a lot. He was on recently. If you guys want that episode, just message me. I promise I'll share it with you. I think the directionality of cause and effect is the real lesson here. And I really want to double down on this. The successful people in the fitness industry and in life and business, very rarely, yes, you have your occasional Mr. Beast who is the very edge of the bell curve. There are people, your Jake and Logan Pauls, and whether you like those guys or not, there will be people who did have, some certainly metrics of status and success, depending on how you measure that. in the public eye where, okay, and that was built upon, a savvy social media early. The overwhelming majority of the people, the direction is the other way. They've done something else. Virtually all of the leaders in the fitness industry, the authorities, the guests that I have on here, built something. And the following and the reputation and the renown in the industry was built upon a legacy of career success, coaching success, of having created a successful business, having created resources. I just had Tony Gentlecore on here. Tony Gentlecore's got a good social media following. Is he social media savvy? Not overly. He'll admit that. He's busy raising his son, Julian. But Tony wrote for T-Nation for years. That is how I know who Tony was. Tony was one of the original founders of Cressy Sports Performance, which is another legendary performance gym that, again, he's walked the walk. And then all this was before social media certainly was big, before Instagram was a thing. And, people seek out Tony because of his reputation and relationships in the industry, his footprint, his public speaking, his seminars, right? And that's the directionality that I really try to get everybody to understand. It's a good lens as to who to follow and to learn from as the people who've actually done it. And for the coaches listening, because I know there's a lot of you guys here, yeah, I absolutely believe it's wise to learn how to use social media. It is still a very powerful vehicle, but it is not the thing that then builds the business. The social media generally grows off of the lessons and wisdom of success, actually coaching people.
Yeah. I mean, what do you have to share of value if you haven't done a thing, right? When you've done the thing, you have tremendous value to offer people on social media. If you haven't done the thing, you're usually just regurgitating things that you've heard other people say because you don't have perspective. And I love who was this? I think it was this Andrew Bustamante, CIA guy. He's got this kind of spiel on the difference between perception and perspective. And in order to have perspective, you actually have to have wisdom and knowledge. So to really have a perspective on how to help a gym owner, I would suggest you've had to have built a gym, right? But these days, people who have trained nobody in person are now starting online training businesses. They lack perspective, but they have a perception of what is possible because of what they're running into, the people they're following, and what they're seeing. And I think that is it's a missing element from society today. People are all about faking it till they make it, finessing, and I just think that is it's a fool's errand. It may work, it may not, but I do know if you do the hard work, if you study, if you overcome adversity, if you make plan A the focus and there is no plan B, you make connections with people, you continue to reevaluate and recalibrate yourself and keep moving forward, like you can make it happen. Anybody, you can make it happen. But if you don't believe it and you're not willing to do the work, or you're trying to hack it, right, through social media like Hop Tua, right, that's not necessarily going to help you,
If anybody gets that reference, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
If not, you need to Google it. I'm not going to spoil it for you. Andy, thank you. This was a treat. I'm grateful to have you on here. And normally I'm like all in and I tell everybody you need to go follow Andy. I want the right people to follow Andy, okay? You're probably all going to like it after this. Well, this is how they connect with you on social media, but
right.
Especially if you're someone who feels like, wow, I could learn a lot from a mentor like Andy and just enjoy his social media. I mean, guys, I'll go follow him, but the right people, you'll know if you're the right person that has to dive into Andy's stuff, because as I told earlier, I've introduced people to Andy. They knew that Andy was the right person for them, and that has, changed their lives. So Andy, my friend, thank you so much for coming on.
Much love, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you.